Welcome to Fontribute, where we talk about fonts and their attributes. Fontribute. This is Thomas Jockin from TypeThursday, and with me is the lovely Erin McLaughlin. Hey, Erin, how are you doing today?
I am super.
Awesome. So, Erin, walk me through what are we going to be talking about today?
Today we have something kind of similar to last week's talk. We've got some more fractured, kind of fragmented looking typefaces. We have Pilot, which was released by Bold Monday, and Zalamander, which was released by Just Another Foundry probably a decade ago already. But they're
we seem to have a trend of doing like these flashbacks, like 10 years greatest hits brought back again.
yeah, obviously the ideas are still relevant, and there's just new ways of kind of approaching the same kind of problems we've always had and different styles. And you can see they're both very condensed. Pilot is really compressed, which is interesting. And the other aspect that I think we'll be talking a lot about is that they have a lot of kind of more straight lines like last week. We've got a lot of like kind of straight segmented areas. There's a lot of like breaking of fracturing of strokes. What do you think about these two?
Yeah, I would say I think they're both exploring the idea of broken scripts, kind of almost like a sans serif rendering of black letter, of broken script fractures almost, I would say. And I think it's, really interesting. Their model might be very similar, but I think their executions are very different in how they choose to go about it. So I really appreciated when I kind of said, "Oh, Pilot looks really promising. What should we talk about based on that?" And you recommended Zalamander. When I saw the sample of it, I was like, "Wow, this is a really fascinating counterpoint or example to express some of these ideas that these typefaces explore." So I think it's a great place to have a conversation.
Definitely. I know we'll get into the one-on-one characters really soon, checking those out side by side, but just at a glance, it's kind of interesting for us to look at these alphabets and seeing that, well, not only is Pilot more compressed, but it's also kind of, it feels a little more, I guess I would say normal. Like it feels like a readable kind of sign painterly, not predictable, but I feel like you can read this really well, and it's a little bit more toned down. But Zalamander is looks insane right now. It kind of reminds me of Norse runes, like those old rune writing systems. Like I don't know if you know what those are, but yeah, it's like it almost looks otherworldly. Like it looks kind of alien. And I liked how check out the uppercase. I like how the uppercase letters kind of, there's some repetition of or referencing of the lowercase letters as well. So that's something we're not going to have enough time to look at, but I just thought for viewers at home, it's something interesting to take note of.
Yes, I would agree. I think definitely Zalamander is much more exuberant in its attitude about this. Feels like the skeleton is just so apparent, and it's in all the moves it's making, that it stands out, especially I think as you said, in the uppercase, in a way that Pilot doesn't do. It doesn't. It seems much more regularized in how it's more in the expected models we would assume for typefaces of this job, in terms of readability. While Zalamander is a little more exuberant to kind of abstract in how it renders its forms.
Definitely. Yeah, maybe we should start checking out letters side by side so we can kind of explore further what some of these things we're noticing are. Cool.
Got it. All right. So, Erin, what's the first thing you notice when we look at the lowercase n's between the two?
Woo! Yeah, they're so cool. That's what I noticed. But I think the kind of defining feature that I see that makes them have a much different execution is that Pilot has kind of one extra area that Zalamander doesn't. It kind of breaks right here. The line kind of has one extra little turn here at the shoulder, whereas Zalamander just goes up and then down right away. So it has this kind of pointy jutting, which you don't really see often in a typeface. It's actually kind of pointing to the northeast corner up here where this almost flat edge is, whereas we're typically seeing letters, most letters when we see an N, or most typefaces or lettering samples, it kind of curves downward and you have a more normal looking shoulder. What do you think?
Yes. No, I agree with that. So in terms of, yeah, it's almost like it's such an extreme abstraction with a Zalamander that it literally was kind of breaking an expected curve we would expect, as you're noticing. Some other things I also noticed that while there is that difference, there are a lot of similarities. One is I'm seeing this slight like taper back and then straight down, right? Both are doing that. One more than the other. Also, both have this kind of arching happening on the right side. Now, in Zalamander, it does it by just like a certain flatness right here, right? And then it goes down. While in Pilot, it's more of an arching, right?
Yeah, it's so subtle. It's so subtle. It's crazy.
Super subtle.
Yeah, it's really neat. Another interesting thing about Pilot that I've noticed, looking at these shapes, is that some extra cuts were added, like, check this out, like right here. There's kind of like an extra flat edge and up here. And that kind of gives this more round, like softness to it when you see it kind of from far away. All the letters in Pilot look kind of slightly rounded on the edges, I think because of these little cuts that the designer took off. But Zalamander is just like bold in your face, just straight up crazy pointy angles. So that's also kind of an interesting thing that I noticed.
Yeah, it's much more rigid. There's a certain rigidness in the Zalamander example. The Pilot, yeah, I would agree. I think it has a certain impression of roundness, right? But it's not exactly rounded.
Right, definitely not.
Those cutoffs are not even Bezier curves. Those are just straight points. I think that's
those
an
are
important
flat
lesson
segments.
too.
Right.
Yeah, is that I think a trick a lot of people may miss in type design is that sometimes you can imply a curve with straight points, right? That's basically the effect we're seeing there. Instead of rendering that with Bezier curves, you can get the same effect with just straight points at a small radius, right?
Yeah, totally. That's kind of like what we talked about last week too. So check that video out if you haven't already. And then another thing that's interesting and similar, I guess, about these two is because they're so condensed, you'll also notice that like the cut down here is pretty far down in both of them. You know, there's a kind of a dramatic cut there, which I think makes it a little more legible and more distinctive when it's in such a narrow space. Like it really helps define what the letter actually is. Otherwise,
you mean
oh, go ahead.
You mean the joint, correct?
Yeah, joint.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, I'm not seeing any markings if you didn't put it up yet.
Oh, oops, there's a delay. Here we go. Like, yeah, right here. Really kind of just this. So this is a theme that's kind of carried across in both typefaces throughout it, is these really deep joints. I think Zalamander even more so, which I'm sure we'll see in a moment. But
yes. Oh, one last thing before we move on is also I want to take notice that notice the overall contrast system. It's relatively there is contrast, right, in the joint area as we're discussing, moving to the shoulder in Zalamander, but it's pretty. But notice the overall evenness and weight in the vertical stems.
Yeah.
While in Pilot, again, it maintains a relatively close weight relationship between this arch on the top and the stem, but the joint we're talking about is much thinner because it has a kind of taper in to introduce some contrast that Zalamander does not have. I think we'll see in the other letters as well.
Definitely, and that really helped its ability to become so much more narrow. If you probably couldn't build okay, I guess this is a challenge. Someone build a successful typeface as narrow as Pilot, but without that bit of contrast. I mean, like, it would be so hard. It looks really good the way the designer used the tiny thin areas to define some of these forms.
Right.
Cool.
So let's hop over.
Let's move
so the
on.
O, I think the O is so like it expresses so much what these projects are doing for such a simple shape. I think the main note I want to take away was just looking at the Zalamander O. Just its whole skeleton form is so radically different than the Pilot system. Like it feels like it's almost like a wedge, like a lemon shape, like that.
Yeah,
versus this shape.
Definitely. This one extra turn that was made in this O shape like makes so much of a difference. It adds a whole extra plane. And those counter forms, if you look at the negative space, if you look at the counter forms, it's also cool to notice. I mean, they are kind of pointing different directions a little bit, which is also kind of neat to notice. It's kind of like they're almost mirror forms of one another, even though the typefaces themselves don't feel like they're mirrors. But you know, we've got kind of these pointed in slightly different directions. I love how you described it as a lemon. That's pretty funny. It's also neat to see that these kind of flat, I mean, they're not completely horizontal, but these kind of flat pieces at the bottom of an O, you never see that. But in this typeface, it makes sense. Pilot, though, is a little more traditional in how it's kind of like, you know, pivoting slightly on these points right here. And like you said, again, with the contrast, like this little area, I don't want to cover it up too much. This little area here is the thinnest part of the form in Pilot and kind of gives it a little bit more contrast. But Zalamander, like we were saying, is a lot more low contrast, and this still is the thinnest part, but it's not, you know, it's not a point. It's a straight part of this wacky line that made up the side of the O. It's so unusual.
Yes, I would say so. I think it definitely, it kind of this is what gave me my impression of being like a black letter broken script model, was because of this O. I think that's kind of really tipped me off to it, because it's such an unusual shape. It's so non-Roman. You know what I mean? Like it's not.
Yeah.
It calls from a different tradition of thinking of how form got drawn, and it's been but now expresses basically a low contrast monolinear shape instead. And I think it is interesting to know, like, as you said, that momentum shift. Like the counter in Pilot gives this momentum like going this way, right? Well, meanwhile in Pilot it feels like this way. That's the internal shape. The counter is creating that momentum, and then it feels like the external shapes have to compensate for that to give the feeling of stability within the letter form.
Yeah, definitely. It's also interesting even to look at, like, you know, if you're writing this or checking out the negative spaces, kind of the O is in Pilot is a lot more kind of square and fills up the space. But something I love about Zalamander is like there are these really huge portions of kind of negative space around the forms that are created by these, you know, weird strokes. So I mean, on the sentence level, when we'll see words, that's what makes it so distinctive. Like, you know, we'll see that toward the end, but watch those negative spaces. It's so interesting to see how they play with those negative spaces differently.
That's a very interesting point, because I felt like when I was looking at in word settings of Zalamander versus Pilot feels like it has such a certain evenness, right?
Yeah.
You can kind of get lost in reading the words because there's an overall evenness. So it's so extreme a level in its approach, right? I think what you're speaking about here. Meanwhile, with Zalamander, it felt like everything felt so like slightly disjointed. Like I was seeing more individual letters as words combined together. Maybe this is probably the reason why I sensed that I had that instinct, was because of this counter space relationship that you're talking about.
Yeah, it's really weird. Like Zalamander has a lot of texture to it, which you wouldn't think at all. But it really, the light and dark, you know, the negative space play is just intense in Zalamander. Right. And we'll continue seeing it. Ooh, how about in the next letter? I don't know. Anything more about O? Okay.
I'm good. I'm set for O, personally.
Great.
But we can move on to the D here.
Super. What are your thoughts about our Ds here?
So I think, again, what we kind of hinted out with the N and the O is that there looks like there's a new movement that happens in Pilot, right? It's kind of like this move here, then over, up, and around, that Zalamander's not doing. It just kind of goes whamp, over, and then back. So this, again, feels like a black letter, kind of broken script kind of structure, skeleton form instead.
Yeah, I want to say it's such a fast movement in Zalamander that it seems much more quick. Of like if you were writing these with writing tools, it's very fast. Anyway, continue.
Yes, no, I totally agree with that. Also, as well, just looking at again the same thing where like this you might think at first is perfectly straight shapes in the stem, but they're not. They're tapered. There's a certain tapering going on. I feel like going momentum like this and then kind of out, right? I get that. That's the sensation I feel looking at it.
Yeah, it's so subtle, but it makes a big difference, especially like in these sans serif faces where usually, I don't know, if you want a little kind of movement for something to not feel so stale, it's a very like subtle move that can make it feel more alive. Same thing with like, I kind of love the way these curves are all kind of related to one another, and they add to that kind of like soft feel. Like look at this. This is angled up here too. I mean, it's kind of a neat little informal, quick decision that can make it feel a lot more, I don't know, I guess lively, I don't know, human, I'm not sure, but and soft in Pilot, feels softer. I love this. Oh gosh, I still can't believe it. Like this Zalamander D. You don't really see many successful typefaces that have a, such a crazy sloped curve like that shoulder. What would that term be? Is that the shoulder of the D? Anyway, it's drooping downward. It's just like, it looks like it would be really sad, like a weak little form. But because there's so much weird other interplay and that kind of shape is repeated in a lot of the other shapes, like the O we just saw. It's like, it gives it that structure. And I guess to kind of counterbalance the other curves that you'll be seeing. And it's just so thick too. I think it also adds to the weight of it. So the weight of the letter. So it seems more impactful.
Yes. No, I agree with everything you're saying. I think a big note too is, again, like, I think if this was perfectly straight, the stem as we're talking about, it would feel very rigid and very stale, which is a very common problem in sans serifs, that they let their logic dominate too much. They let the logic overpower the flow of what their words trying to communicate or say together. So I agree with you on that point about that.
Right.
And again, with Pilot. Oh, go on. I'm sorry.
Oh no, yeah, and the same thing, like you said, like overriding the logic of like wanting to make it just a straight line. Like here, this tiny little bit of angle upward helps to kind of balance that thrust going in the other direction. And having the deep cut here again kind of helps balance these white areas to make it feel more balanced there. Go ahead. What were you going to say about Pilot?
No, I'll ask about Pilot too. Again, I had to really close. Those feeling of roundedness from the stem terminals, I'm looking close in it. They're straight shapes.
They are again? Wow.
No. There's a slight bulge. I see it.
Okay.
It's a very slight bulge, like here on this segment and this segment. It's super subtle, but then
the top and the bottom are flat, though, aren't they?
Oh, flat. Yes.
Cool.
Yeah. Also, like, notice, like, I would need to go back to the end to clarify this. Was there an ink trap kind of system set up?
Oh yeah, I forgot. We didn't talk about that in the in the end. There, yeah, we've got like a little straight flat segment there that kind of, I guess accounts for. I mean, I guess you would want that in a very narrow typeface. You want a little bit of sort of ink trappy space for that to go. That flat area helps with that. Yeah.
That's something I just noticed, that in terms of strategies for trying to get as much white as possible in a very condensed typeface.
Definitely. And here it's like, I'm glad it's like a little more exaggerated than you might see in some other typefaces, because it's like, it fits so well with just the feeling of the typeface. Like, because it has these kind of little cuts elsewhere, and feels kind of brushy to me. Like, I really like the fact that it's kind of more distinctive. It feels at home there. Sometimes I think those are kind of tacky and they're just pasted on in some typefaces that don't really need them, but here it feels really at home. I think that was a good decision.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, again, I think it seems to harmonize well with this model. Again, I'm thinking the broken script idea. It feels a certain not jankiness, a certain like jauntiness. There you go. That's the word. Yeah, I'd agree with that. Is there anything you want to cover for the D, or can we move on?
I think we can move on.
Okay.
Let's check out the next one.
The G. So I think it goes without saying, kind of the clear difference between them is like two-story G versus the one-story G, right? There's that. I think, again, it kind of like summarizes the overall while their different models are similar in some ways, their kind of conclusions are very different. Pilot, it's kind of more of a romanized black letter, right? That's kind of its thinking, how it expresses itself, right? While the Zalamander is, again, this more gothic idea. And this,
Yeah,
I'm kind of in love. Oh, go on.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Oh no, I'm just saying. I'm kind of in love with like how they were able to kind of synergize this kind of curve momentum for the round, this kind of loop over in the secondary section.
It's amazing.
I really, yeah.
Yeah, it almost looks like I mean, it doesn't look like a letter. It like almost morphs into just some kind of like a logo. Like if you rotated this, it would look like a logo for like maybe a ski resort. Like there's some mountains or something. Anyway, it's very.
Oh, like hills. Oh wait a minute, it would be like this. Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. I mean, it's just so interesting seeing it on its own. I would never have guessed that was a letter if I had just seen it. But the other interesting thing about this, I think, is usually in a letter G, like you don't, I mean, obviously it's kind of rare to have I guess you would call this, if you call this a two-story G in Pilot, Zalamander, this typically is considered a one-story G. But when it's connected, what is it called then? Is it I don't know.
It's kind of it's more of a cursive. I mean, this is kind of a cursive G.
Yeah,
right?
it's a cursive. Yeah, you're right, cursive G. Anyway, wow, I can't believe I don't know that. But it's interesting too to see how that bottom counter form is so much larger than the top, which I don't think you typically don't see that. I would say. So it's kind of neat to me to see the balance of those counter forms. And again,
Yeah,
like this G. I mean, like
you're speaking.
Go ahead. Go. Sorry, the delay.
Oh no, I'm not. Delay, yeah, just double checking because I wouldn't like to notice that too. Like, right, proportionally, this top section is way smaller than where the descender space was allowed to give. Meanwhile, over in Pilot, this feels actually much more even. There's like a kind of equally distant distribution of content, right?
Totally. Except for the funny little ear. I guess he's cheating, but it's cool how the ear. I like how the ear, the choice for it to go upward and keep it as condensed as possible. It's a really kind of fun element, like when you see this in words, how it relates to the tittles on the eyes and stuff. It's kind of fun whenever a G's ear goes upward. I always like that. It's a fun surprise. But yeah, again, like, I'm so in love with the Zalamander G because of all the negative space play happening. Like, there's so much space on this left side that's going to be kind of open whenever it's next to the next letter. It's so cool. It helps define the shape because the right side of the G is just like another really subtle curving line and very plain and ordinary. So all of its character definition comes from that left side. It's very cool.
Yeah, I would agree to say that it is relatively flat on the right side. It is also take notice, like again, that slight indenture right here and right here. It helps prevent it from being. It gives them that cursive feeling in some way, in a very subtle way.
Yeah.
Instead of being so like perfectly straight and, which I think a lot of people would assume this design would include, right? But that would feel so rigid and so completely like it would break any flow in the project.
Yeah, definitely. And it's also fun to see. Oh man, speaking of flow, like also more of these corners. So fun to just see a 90-degree corner on a G. It's bonkers over here on Zalamander. But I love this area of Pilot where this stroke just like eats into it. Oh, that's one of my favorite parts of all typefaces is when there's a two-story G and seeing how they kind of connect up this bottom stroke here. Oh, I love it. I like that this one is kind of more sign painter brushy, where you just leave it there and not go all the way through and kind of flick it upward. There's a lot of energy in that shape.
Yeah, kind of using the abstraction of like two thick strokes next to each other to create a contrast, right?
Yeah.
Because you have the spine over here, and then you have this stroke over here. And these two, kind of like by just association with each other, imply a contrast, right? And that's joints right here. Yeah, I would also note that I'm a little surprised by this second half of the G in Pilot, only because compared to kind of this kind of hinting of smoothness and roundness and all the forms, there's a certain angle, like abruptness if you can see in
You're
the
right. It's very sharp and abrupt in that little middle section there.
middle section. Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
I was a little surprised about that, only because it seems like the program everywhere else was to have this kind of implied softness in some way, as we discussed in the terminals and even the rounds how they're drawn. So that was a little surprising in terms of a introduction to something different than what we were expecting otherwise.
Yeah, true. Although, yeah, I wonder if this, you know, became more soft in here and this were more soft, maybe it would just be too like belabored. It would just, I don't know. Sometimes it's nice to have a little quick movement when you have a complicated shape like the G. I mean, this is one of the most dense and complicated shapes in the Latin alphabet. It's just a lowercase g. There's so much going on. It's kind of nice when there's a little movement and quickness to it. Obviously, Zalamander is the king of quickness. It's like some kind of slides, like water slides or something.
Water slide. Yeah, I would agree with your point about the G though. The G, this is I mean, I was in a very condensed typeface like this. I would, my instincts would tell me as a designer, probably there was a version with a more smooth transition of some kind, but it was getting lost in readability. So I think the conclusion was just to simplify that middle section to allow increased legibility. That'd be my instinct about why it was done like that.
That's beautiful. What's next?
The E.
Mm.
What are your thoughts about this?
Wow. My thoughts are, holy tamale, that's a really bold little, wait, what's the term for that? Oh, shoot. I want to learn.
That upward stroke?
Yeah, what's it called? Oh, golly. Well, whatever. I can't remember.
I mean, it's the terminal. It's just a very, instead of an angled terminal, it's a very literally a linear vertical terminal in this case.
Yes. It's just so cool. I mean, I love how it balances out just the extreme curve of I mean, this is a very curved shape. That's a more just, I think that's a crazier curve. It looks crazier than in the O, I would say. I mean, it looks really distinctive. And again, like enormous amounts of negative space here that are happening in the void. So like you really need this stabilizing dark shape over here. Otherwise this would just feel so incomplete. I love it. It's very cool. And another, very distinct 90-degree angle here. I mean, how many typefaces do you see have those sorts of points on a round shape? I don't think too many. It's very cool. Pilot is a little more normal.
Actually work. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Pilot's a little more normal. I like it. It's very happy looking E. I like it very much. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with you about that on the Zalamander one on the terminal, because I think I agree. I think a lot of designers would probably conclude with just doing this, right?
Ugh, yeah.
That would feel so unbalanced. It would be toppling over. It wouldn't work in any way. Yeah. I think the way as you hinted, the only way to make this compensate was to include the vertical stem, the terminal in this case. Sure. It's one of those things I love about type design. It's when you can solve the problem you've introduced with a certain program, you have to add in these variations to make it work within a whole. And I think this terminal is a great example of that. With the pilot one, again, it's interesting. There's a certain program we've been expecting with pilot, and I brought this slide up because I showed. I think also this terminal is.
Oh, I just remembered. Character. It's called a finial. I just remembered. Okay, finial.
Oh, finial. Because I was called. There you go.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, but in the finial, it feels different than the other aspects we've seen so far. There's a certain again, this model of almost it converted from this kind of sign paintery inspiration to black letter in this moment right here in this terminal. That's the impression I got. Again, it's almost similar in my mind a reaction I had with the middle of the G in pilot, where there's a certain abruptness comes in that I did not expect from the other parts of the program. That's what stood out from this E in pilot.
Yeah, it's very strong. It's a really strong way to end that E. I think it's yeah, like you said, it's it seems a little different than what you might expect or something, but the weight of it, it has a little more heft to it than I would have imagined, and it's very, I don't know, stabilizing, and it's very distinctive too when you see it in line. I mean, the fact it goes up kind of far, like there's also a lot of negative space happening here too in the bottom. It's kind of a cool texture when you'll see it in a word.
Yeah,
love it.
Yeah. I was kind of following the program. Whoa!
Whoop!
Oh boy! Ran off my screen for some reason. Okay, there we go. If I kept going with it, like I agree. Like I feel like what you would expect is to stop is to stop here, right? But it probably looks like it was not. It felt incomplete in that negative space zone you were talking about. So the conclusion was to add a terminal coming out this way.
Yeah, it's nice. It's also, you know, I also bet those sorts of decisions are probably really important in, I mean, the fact that these are very narrow condensed typefaces, you have such little space to kind of get the feeling of a letter. And I think to be very deliberate about showing this kind of curve going upward, rather than just kind of like fading away in the bottom. Like to make it feel a little bit more solid in that tiny little window of space. I mean, I think that's another reason why it's important to do that in these narrow faces. You really have to show what this letter is.
Yeah, awesome. Okay. The A.
A.
What are your thoughts on the A?
A. Well, Zalamander's again taking a more streamlined approach, as we can see, just like the G. You know, they took we have a more simple single story A with that same kind of curve. I mean, there's actually been a lot of repetition with this curve shape. I mean, there's a lot more repetition, I think, going on in Zalamander's shapes than in Pilot's, I would say. I don't know. Is that true? That might be a complete lie.
Hard to say. I think they're about equal. I think it's just I think the programs are very even. I think actually they've been very consistent with each other.
Yeah,
but,
you're right. Well, you know what? There is one thing that seems a little different to me in Pilot. Like this here on the A, it kind of goes up a little bit higher than like we've been seeing in some of the other shapes. Like so the rounder shapes, they have a little bit more low angle right here. This is like kind of opening up to, I guess, to let a little bit more space in here, so you can tell that it's an A very distinctively. But it looks kind of happy and open to me. I don't know. Did you notice that?
So you're talking about specifically like this zone over to this and then down, right?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, it's interesting because it's exactly the same instinct I had about the E before, right? Like basically, it's kind of mirroring that instinct. And then in this case, the terminal went down, or kind of like a down slant in this case, when you add the contrast versus this one coming up.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's probably the main concern was this kind of counter space, specifically because there's a bowl here they have to handle to deal with.
Yeah, definitely. Man, wow. You're right. There's a lot of consistency in both of these. You're totally right. This is so funny. We're looking at, I'm looking again at some of the other details we have going on. We've got the little flat ink trappy thing going here. We've got the same kind of cool curved bottoms. We've got that outswing in both of these. This is angled. This is a little bit more straight. This is also slightly angled up. Even at this large scale, it's really subtle to see, but it's fun to know these little changes. I would love to see what Zalamander would look like if those were completely flat. It would completely change the feeling of the typeface. Yeah, it would be kind of fun.
I think it would probably be very stale. I think it'd be way too rigid. It would feel way too mechanical.
Yeah,
and its feeling, which is ironic considering it does like it's such a regimented program. Yet that's kind of, for me, the kind of the instinct of a great professional is even with a project that seems very regimental and modular, they can still infuse some humanity, some like flavor to it that doesn't feel staid or rigid or kind of flat in its presentation.
Definitely. Yeah.
All right. So, Erin, so what's the kind of some of the takeaways you've seen from reviewing these projects?
I think I've repeated myself 400 times talking about how much the negative space in Zalamander is like really, I think, really fascinating. So I think this is the perfect way to see what I'm talking about. When we look at Pilot, it's like each of these letters really well kind of fits this kind of rectangular little space. It's like all the kind of, it's very even, and you know, when you look at the letter, it feels, or the letters in a row that kind of feel like an even little bumpy flow, and all the space is kind of taken into consideration and wanting to be filled. But Zalamander has, you know, like, we got like all sorts of areas here where there's like a lot of shape definition. And it actually, like at this scale, it seems like these forms seem a lot more round in a way, which I would never expect of a typeface that looks mostly made of kind of straight or, you know, barely curved pieces. But it really has a lot of crazy rhythm in it because of all of these negative space shapes. I don't know. And all the points, these like weird little, all of those corners happening in Zalamander that weren't rounded. I mean, they're very distinctive, and they kind of like have this weird contrast to those round forms. It's like a lot of texture, a lot of playfulness. Pilot seems, I mean, I love the roundness to it. It feels very soft. I don't know. Those are my gut reactions to seeing these in word form. What about you?
Yeah. Well, give me 1 second. I'm gonna cough. Give me 1 second. Woo. Finding some allergies here, so pardon me here. I was doing great for the whole presentation until like just now. So pardon me, guys. Sorry about that. Yeah, I would say yes. There is a certain kind of smoothness, and I think in Pilot that you see really in a word setting. But it's a certain regimentalism too, right? It's a certain such consistency in the forms and how they feel. They feel so smooth and even in their approach. They all kind of blend in together, right, into like a smooth texture overall. Zalamander, it's just because of the interplay dance of so many parts. It's so excuse me. Yeah, it seems like it's such a like. Let me put it this way. I think it's like if I can give an analogy, Pilot's kind of like I feel like it's this, while Zalamander is like in effect. I that's the impression I get. So actually, you know what's funny in my mind, like comparison to other typefaces, and almost like I would love to see what Zalamander would look like next to Journal we talked about last week.
Sure.
Yeah. Just because they both had the kind of really toothy texture with a certain kind of disjointedness that works to harmonize together because of attention to negative space, right? But they have a very kind of isolating, atomizing effect on each other. Like they feel like individual units that are sitting next to each other, right? Like kind of like block 1, block 2, and block 3. While Pilot again has that smoothed out, everything kind of coheses together into this smooth, perfect texture across each other. It's a very that's one, and again, this is really fascinating because, as we said, they're both incredibly regimental, you know, and modular in our systems, but the end results are feeling so different. That's the big takeaway from me.
Yeah, definitely. Oh gosh, again, this is cool. Like especially looking at the D and the P. You know, how often do you see a lowercase p with such a crazy, you know, like upward movement here? And it really kind of looks like almost a mirror of the D. Oh, it's just so interesting. Really, really crazy, rigid, and lots of like, I would even call it a sparkle to this. I mean, it's very, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of negative space play with this, and a lot of kind of points where you, oh gosh, unexpected things, places where your eye would rest that you wouldn't normally rest. All these little flat segments. It's so unusual. And I agree. Like I think it feels like each of these letters feels a little bit more like a separate piece. Like I feel like this was someone inscribing this, scratching this, or you know, chipping it into stone or something. I mean, it feels very, I don't know. Maybe, I guess, okay, I'm at a loss for words. But Pilot is so smooth. I love it. I mean, it feels like someone painted it. The only thing I don't understand, I'm sorry, I have to say one negative thing. I don't understand. I don't understand. I'm not a fan of F ligatures. I really, I'm not a fan of them.
On both of them. Are you against both, or does
this is a ligature, but to me it makes a little more sense. This draws so much attention to itself in Pilot, like I kind of get like thrown off by it. Why is that second one higher than the first one? I thought the point of an F ligature is to make it look more like natural and flow together. Anyway, I'm sorry, I had to say one thing.
No, it's all good. Actually, I do. I agree with you on the point of. I think this points at attention. I think my issue about it more is this project of Pilot is so kind of a romanized black letter, right? That move with an FF ligature, like straight up, it's kind of literally like kind of back arching your F.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like I think my intention is more. It feels too much black letter and not like Latinized enough or not Romanized enough. That would be my. If I had to critique it, that would be the main issue I have with it.
Yeah, actually, I never thought about that. I mean, I guess it's a little harder to make a successful double F ligature in such a narrow typeface too. You don't have as much space to kind of work with if you wanted to go backward or kind of, I don't know. I'm not sure. But anyway,
all good.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't leave on a bad note. Here's the thing I was talking about with the cool ear on the G and the I tittle. I love that it's kind of like seeing these little happy bits pointing up. Oh, and the D, the angle on the D and the B. Oh, I love these angles. Okay, I'll calm down now.
No.
This is fun to see though. Thank you for inviting me to look at this. Oh wait, do we have any sort of like moral of the story like we did last time? Or like what are the takeaways?
I think actually, it's funny talking to you about this. I think a big one is in my type design education, a very big focus on is the smoothness of color. Right, we should be aiming for this kind of smooth silkiness in our letter forms, so they all bleed together and merge together into a whole cohesive whole. I think a lot of times Zalamander's approach would be kind of frowned upon because it's so more atomized and how the letter forms are working. They're more acting as individual units than merging as a whole. But I think actually in this exploration with you, I'm seeing that there's value in both methodologies. And specifically, there's a very clear intention of negative space in Zalamander that the design project is really aware of. So I think it's been enlightening for me to see this different approach.
And you know what? I'm going to bet that if I compared Zalamander to some other typeface with like a similar narrowness, like a typical sans serif that's kind of narrow, whatever that might be. And I looked at them, like I printed them or I put them at like 6 point or something, like really small. I had this hunch that Zalamander would be easier to read. I don't want to like mess up our format here and ask you to zoom out of this image. I don't want to wreck the illusion of this of this podcast thing. But like the thing I love about this negative space play, the fact that they don't all blend together, like it might be easier to recognize each individual letter if this were if you needed to recognize them, if this were used in like small space, small sizes or something. That's going to be my hunch. Maybe I'll do that after this.
Actually, yeah, I think your hunch is 100% accurate, and this is exactly what I mean by that. Is that I think there are grounds and contexts of situations where this kind of the rules of type design are very contextual based, as you're saying. And it's always a question of which principles do we align to first, right? So kind of what you're hinting at is kind of legibility, right? That the quest for smoothness and regularness only applies up to the point where legibility gets compromised. Yeah. And in contexts like small setting, for example, something that maybe in other settings maybe too broken and like more atomized might be a good attribute in other context situations like you're getting at. At smaller sizes. So I think I think those are valid points.
Yeah, very well put. You totally said that in a much clearer way. Yeah, you're right. Oh, this is great. I love that we can like learn from different typefaces like this. Like we learn very different things and learn about different approaches. Oh, this is great.
Yes.
Thank you, Fontribute.
Yes. Well, thank you, Erin, for being part of Fontribute. I love having you on the show. This is Thomas Jockin. This has been Erin. And this has been Fontribute. So I know we did it. I know this is probably like a 35-minute, 40-minute conversation, but if you've been hanging in there this whole time, thank you.
Thank you.
I really hope you learned a lot from this conversation. Please leave your comments below if you have any questions. any typeface you want us to talk about next week, we'll be more than happy to check those out. Otherwise, this has been Thomas Jockin and Erin, and we'll talk to you next week. Take care. Bye.